In a word, in two senses at once, for some, the Praetorians are a symbol of the power of the Roman Empire and invincible warriors. And some would say that the Praetorians were accomplices of dictators and cannibals who beat up their own people to help the emperor to sit on the throne. But who's right? The regular viewers of our channel's regular viewers will confidently declare that both at the same time but at different historical period, because there is no black and white does not exist and life is not an unambiguous thing. The Praetorians are no exceptions, and in the next couple of minutes we'll live a day in the skin of one of them to try to get to the bottom of this. Meet Gianluigi Buffon, typical Praetorian of the first cohort of the Roman at 64 an hour. Gianluigi is bored at his post in the fortress. The Praetorian fortress was built by the Emperor Tiberius in 23 BC, and named it the Bonfire of Praetorius. Of the fortress stand in Rome to this day. Even the metro station quarters are named after her. Well, in the 64th year for our Buffon's home for the fortress served as a barracks for the guards of the city, and the emperor's guards who their own names Praetorians with the light hand of the first emperor of Rome August. The idea is very simple and understandable to modern man. To guard the external frontiers and conquests were the legions that brought Rome power but who guarded internal order. The police guards existed in the Roman Republic, but all the organizations were ineffective and fragmented. So August decided to assemble a bunch of elite warriors to protect themselves and at the same time, and the internal order of the empires. Name didn't have to go far in the tent warlords or headquarters of the emperor. If he was present at battle were called Praetoriums, a place posh guarded, and by analogy Augustus called his personal guard as Praetorians. There were slightly more than the men guarding. There were 9 cohorts of 1,003 cohorts each were base time in the very fortress of our buffoon or on the stand, and the regular that and another 6 scattered around the surroundings. The empire got antidotes as against internal revolts such against coups. Even if a rampaging legion goes to Rome it will be defeated. An elite force ready for anything. In such a for 10 years our army has been in service. Gianluigi was recruited by the Latium. Roman men were not taken as Praetorians, too pampered and corrupted by the people of the capital. But until the 2nd century AD, Praetorians still had to be to the Italians, so the recruiters roamed all over the country in search of healthy and fit guys. There was no shortage of them, and rather the opposite. For joining the Praetorian Guard lined up huge queues. To our Buffon was helped by my father, who had served and had connections among centurions. It's a typical situation because it was hard to get into the guard. First of all, the Praetorians served 16 years instead of the traditional legionary 20. Secondly, Praetorians didn't gallop through Syria, Ampere, Siamese, Brittany. Them guys, they were quietly serving inside the empire. The worst combat experience you could have was from kicking the unwashed Germanic barbarians who had raised another rebellion. And thirdly, they fed and clothed Praetorians were much better than ordinary legionnaires, because they are the embodiment of the power, the emperor's power. So our buffoon is dressed the appropriate paternal helmet with movable on the forehead, and a puffy mohawk, a cuirass with imitation abs, and tunic protecting the metal from the sun as Praetorians used as weapons classic gladius cannon and pilot's dart. However, they could be distinguished from it's easy to tell them apart. First of all, our buffoon uses not rectangular but an oval shield in the manner of the coziness of ancient Greek hoplites. Secondly, mohawks were not worn on legionary helmets. They were worn except by centurions and commanders, but most often they had a crest was transverse. It's funny for those who know past Roman. Fell centurion for the picture shows punk with a longitudinal mohawk, and such mohawks were more commonly worn by Praetorians, but no center, and the main difference from any warrior in Rome is the color of his tunic. The Praetorians were the only ones who were allowed to use purple. Purple was considered an imperial color and legionnaires could not dream of it, but Praetorians and guardsmen very much so. In fact, our Gianluigi is dressed in the latest fashions. But what does he do here? It's rather boring. Each of the 3 cohorts in Rome take turns to serve in the imperial palace once a day. The guard changes, the password is updated, and our buffoon guards from the back entrance to the kitchen, making sure no one without security clearance enters the palace on another day. Gianluigi will be guarding, as he did today, the Praetorian fortress itself, acting as a guard during games. Buffon could be pulled out in the cordon of the Aria Colosseum or a banal patrol in day games, the day of drunken Romans who could cause a riot. cases where the Praetorians even took in battles, though mostly as technicians. The guys shot their bows at the fighters from below, complicating the task by executing the cowardly gladiators, and very rarely could act as opponents for the stunted slaves. Of course, the probability of victory in such a case was 100%. Thus the emperor was demonstrating to the citizens that his guards were invincible. How much does a buffoon get for such a dodgy job? That's a fun question. Remember our reel about legionnaires, where we told you that a warrior risking his life for Rome got 900 sesterces a year. Multiply that by 3. And you get the salary of our John Luigi. 2,700 sesterces a year is about 7 sesterces a day. That it was possible to buy 7 liters of wine, 5 kilos of bread, 16 a trip to the baths, or a nice tunic. Not bad, isn't it, especially considering that the Praetorians were fed and maintained the Praetorians at the expense of the state. If you go a little further, in a couple of months, our buffoon could have easily collected for a donkey or a cow, and in 16 years of service, he could have easily saved up for a posh, a small farm. Considering John Luigi joined the guard when he was 18, so at 34, he could have had a nice cottage, land to own, and a carefree life. The average value of the firm was between 20,000 and 40,000 sesterces. If you put away half of it every year, it would seem at first sight that it is impossible to save for it in a lifetime of service. So what's the magic in Dano? It's no joke. The modern word has its roots from the Roman word donati mind, which meant lump sum payments to citizens for clerks or costumers. Emperors, it could be a birthday master for legionaries, the victory of an important battle, and even for slaves there were such payments for something outstanding. In the case of our John Luigi, donations are received all the time. For the guard at first was implied to be the emperor's pillar, but with the change of emperor raised the question whether the Praetorians obeyed him. And to placate the guards, each new emperor paid the soldiers a one-time to over, and periodically in conspiracies or mutinies, he threw bonus tops. And for loyalty, the emperor Caligula, for example, in honor of his ascension to the throne, for example, he paid every Praetorian 2,000 sesterces, practically a year's salary for a second. And the next emperor Claudius had a problem. It wouldn't work a second time, and in order to pay respects to the Praetorians it was necessary to increase the amount, but so Claudius bumped up 15,000 sesterces each, and then 100 more for each feast of the ascension to the throne. In case anyone hasn't figured it out by now, the Emperor Claudius paid 7 years' salary to each Praetorian, just to keep them loyal to the emperor. Spoiler: in the future it's going to be a huge problem. Well, for our buffoon it's a very good thing he caught the moment the emperor ascended Nero to the throne. Nero also gave everyone 15,000 sesterces each, but as a bonus, he promised another 2,000 for successes in service. So while the monetary problems are Sanji, like all Praetorians don't worry about salary either. You can only take it for a tick. Money's a bitch to pay. The Praetorian will definitely snag the coronation of 1 or 2 emperors, and in almost double his salary in 16 years with the help of tomatoes. At this point many will rush to accuse the emperors of foolishness, and that they were paying insane Praetorian money for nothing. Friends, it's not true. The Praetorians are what brought internal order to the empire. The Greek polities, being part of Rome, were constantly at war with each other. The Germanic tribes were always coming out of forests attacking the villages. British tribes led by the Baltics staged a large-scale rebellion with an army of 230,000 men of the army, and the Praetorians assisted legion along with 20,000 troops defeated the Powters in a landslide. The mere existence of a huge guard nullified even the thought of rebellion in many regions, and to Jupiter alone knows how many people have cancelled plans for coups simply because they feared the wrath of the Praetorians, who by the way were a regular army. The Praetorians and cohorts included professional spies, assassins and provocateurs. Athens and Sparta were once more at odds with each other. Why make a fuss when you can poison the leaders of the opposing factions and the conflict would be over? And that's what the Praetorians were doing. Decisive contribution to the so-called Pax Romana. 200 years of peace in the empire era began in the 27th year BC AD. And ended at 180 only 2 times in 2 centuries. Civil war was officially proclaimed that for the vast territory of Rome, a mere nothing, and that peace was not achieved without the help armed of the Praetorians, who by the way, not only acted as police officers, We didn't put our buffoon in 64 for nothing. For this is the year when the Great Fire broke out in Rome, the Great Fire of the 18th and 19th of July. The commercial quarter caught fire and ended up after a week of embroidery. 4 of the 14 districts of the city and 7 more districts of the city were significantly suffered. The ancient Roman historian Tacitus, who survived fire, said that Emperor Nero immediately returned from a trip to Rome, and at his own expense began to fight the fire, and according to Tacitus said that the Praetorians were not only the role of police officers to protect the property from looting. The Praetorians, according to his recollections, acted as firefighters, rescuing people and assisting in extinguishing. Our buffoon will have a very difficult week, after which the citizens of Rome to call the Praetorians monsters definitely won't. It will happen much later. The main negativity towards the Praetorians began somewhere in the 80th year AD. Era, for as we have already mentioned, the system built on donating them sooner or later. The Praetorians, instead of a force helping the emperor, became an independent body. They were asking for more and more money as donations killed undesirable emperors and helped the convenient ones. It got to the point that in 193, the Praetorians even staged disgraceful auction in which they sold emperor's office, which was won by Didius Julian, who offered 25,000 sesterces per each Praetorian, and former guardsmen had in fact become a bunch of bastards. And Rome descended into the abyss of coups d'état, of intrigue and corruption in the French language. The word Praetorian is almost a swear word, but it's important to understand that speech and later apartments are God. He was not a bad guy, and the Praetorians did a great job, helped the golden era of the Roman Empire. That's all for now, until we meet again, friends.